I believe Big and Tupac was in-house. All had something to do with death row people.
The streets are going absolutely wild right now because a shocking new arrest just dropped in Tupac's murder case. Exploding out of nowhere like investigators been guarding a hidden nuclear secret for almost 30 years straight. This isn't some rumor, some theory, or some exaggerated YouTube drama. This is a real pull-up, real handcuffs, real pressure, real movement, and real consequences that hit the entire game instantly. And the second that update hit the timeline, everybody's eyes snapped toward one name. Keefe D. Yeah, the same guy already locked up, already talking, already waiting for his day in court while the world tries to piece the truth together. Because if this new arrest connects the way insiders are claiming, Keefe's whole story might finally crack wide open and expose the deeper layers behind everything. People forget something major. There were 4 people in that white Cadillac when those shots rang out on September 7th, 1996, and the streets always believed more names were hiding in the shadows. Now, with this new move, it feels like prosecutors are finally inching toward the real shot call of the one name they've allegedly kept buried in the dark for months while building serious pressure. And if that name drops, the entire case could blow wide open in a way nobody saw coming, flipping the whole narrative upside down completely.
Keefe D and his entourage get into a white Cadillac. Along with Keefe D, the driver is a guy named Terrence Brown. They call him Bubble Up. Behind the driver is DeAndre Smith. He's in the left rear passenger seat. And Keefe D's nephew, Orlando Anderson, he's sitting behind the right front passenger seat.
3 of them, Orlando Anderson, DeAndre Big Dre Smith, and Terrence Bubble Up Brown are long gone, leaving Keefe D as the only living witness to what really went down. But that doesn't mean the investigation begins and ends with him. Prosecutors recently revealed evidence from a 2006 police interview with another gang member who pointed the finger at Davis Long before Keefe D ever went public. That means there's at least one more person out there who knew the truth and spoke to authorities years ago. But the real bombshell? The allegations about who might have been pulling the strings behind the scenes. Keefe D himself has been pointing at Reggie Wright Jr., the former head of security at Death Row Records. And that's just the surface of the names rumored to be involved in orchestrating what happened that night.so while the media stays locked on Keefe D sitting in the Clark County Detention Center. The streets are asking the real questions. Who else knew what was coming? Who else should have been cuffed? And why did it take 27 years to make a single arrest when multiple people clearly knew the story now? How did we even get here? On September 29th, 2023, Las Vegas Metro finally pulled up on Dwayne Keefe D. Davis and charged him with the murder of Tupac Shakur. But this wasn't some miraculous cold case breakthrough or new DNA discovery. Not even close. This arrest happened because Keefe D. simply could not stop talking. For years, interviews, documentaries, podcasts, you name it, he showed up. He wrote Compton Street Legend, openly detailing his life and his involvement in Pac's murder. He talked to law enforcement. He became the go-to guy for every unsolved hip-hop mystery documentary. And every single time, he admitted he was in that white Cadillac the night Tupac was shot.
So what happens next?
And we just came, and I ain't gonna go into the details like that, you know what I'm saying? But, you got it in a book, you done played it, everything else, you know what I'm saying?
Why would anyone do this? Why would someone openly confess to playing a role in the murder of one of the most iconic rappers in history? The answer is simple. Keefe D genuinely believed he was protected. Back in 2008 and 2009, during the LAPD's investigation into Biggie's murder, detectives brought Keefe D in and offered him a proffer agreement to deal that lets you speak freely about crimes without those statements being used against you. Keefe D walked away thinking he had immunity, convinced he could talk about anything, even Tupac's murder, without facing consequence.
Okay, well, I did a deal with the U.S. attorneys, and U.S. attorney and the dude was from D.C., Justice Department. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, you came out here? He like, yeah, I came out here to get you.
Keefe D assumed that immunity covered everything he ever said about Tupac's murder, no matter where he said it. But he was completely wrong. A proffer agreement only protects the statements made inside those specific law enforcement interviews. It does not give you permission to jump on every YouTube podcast, every documentary, and every interview bragging about being involved in a homicide. And it definitely doesn't protect you when you start profiting from those stories through books and paid appearances. But to understand why Keefe D's arrest is only the beginning, we need to rewind to the night it all happened. September the 7th, 1996, Tupac and Suge Knight had just left the Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand. Inside the casino lobby, Tupac and members of the death row entourage confronted and jumped Orlando Anderson, a Southside Compton gang member who had allegedly tried to snatch a death row chain weeks earlier. The entire altercation was captured on surveillance cameras. After leaving the MGM, Tupac and Suge headed toward Club 662 in Suge's black BMW. Around 11:15 p.m., they stopped at a red light at Flamingo Road and Koval Lane. That's when a white Cadillac rolled up on the passenger side right where Tupac was sitting.
Coming up Flamingo and got to the light. He was going to go drink and smoke some weed, and he happened to be hanging out the window. He was hanging out the window like he was in a parade.
Tupac.
Yeah, he was.
At least 13 shots were fired. Tupac was hit 4 times, one bullet tore through his lung, another struck his pelvis, and the remaining shots hit his hand and thigh. Suge was cut by shrapnel but managed to survive. 6 days later, on September 13th, Tupac Shakur died at just 25 years old. Here's where things get even more disturbing. Keefe D openly admits he was sitting in the front passenger seat of that white Cadillac.
You actually see a gun?
No, once he got to reaching, I got to ducking.
So someone from your car
That's what happened.
started shooting at Tupac and Suge.
Lane starts blasting. You say Suge looks over, he sees you.
Orlando Anderson was questioned but never charged, and he was later killed in a Compton shootout in 1998. Big Dre is gone. Bubble Up is gone. Almost everyone who could have confirmed or challenged Keefe D's story is no longer alive, leaving him as the last man standing, and the only one still speaking publicly. While Keefe D was busy moneizing his version of events, Las Vegas prosecutors were quietly paying attention. On July 17, 2023, they executed a search warrant at his home in Henderson, Nevada. Inside, investigators found documents and materials that lined up with the statements he'd been making for years. 2 months later, they made the arrest. But here's where things get even more intriguing and why this case might be far from over. People close to the situation, including individuals familiar with what happened that night, claim that parts of Keefe D's story don't fully line up. And if that's true, it raises serious questions. Because if individuals connected to Death Row Records played any role in influencing what happened, then the simple gang retaliation narrative starts to fall apart. The MGM fight could have been a convenient moment, overshadowing something far more calculated. In that scenario, Keefe D and the men in the Cadillac might have been acting on someone else's agenda. They may have simply been in the right place at the right time while others ensured Tupac would be vulnerable. How did they know exactly where Tupac would be? How did they know the route he was taking? And how did they end up at the exact intersection, at the exact moment, when Tupac's car was stopped at that red light?
He looks over at you, and then, Tupac's busy getting shot. Evidently, the story is Tupac's trying to either get out of
in
the
the
line.
back seat or something.
Yeah, what do you see happening inside of their car?
I seen a bullet going Suge's head. I thought he was dead.
The official story says it was all pure chance. They were cruising around looking for Death Row affiliates to retaliate against, and they just happened to catch Pac at that red light. But a lot of people in the streets don't buy that for a second. Too many coincidences. Too perfect of a moment. And way too many people with motives that had nothing to do with a simple gang dispute. Which brings us right back to the real question, who else was involved? Prosecutors charge Keefe D even though he openly admits he wasn't the trigger man. If he rode with a crew that carried it out, the law holds him responsible. But if that standard applies to Keefe D, shouldn't it apply to everyone else who may have played a role? The person who supplied the gun, the ones who might have tipped them off about Pac's location, even the Death Row insiders that some witnesses claim was celebrating when they heard Pac was gone, shouldn't they be under the same spotlight?
That shit was crooked as a mother. We can get people killed behind it.
That's the reality hitting the streets right now. There were bigger players involved. People with more power, more influence, and way more to lose if the full truth ever came out. And yet here we are, with Keefe D sitting in a jail cell as the only one paying the price, while those higher-ups walk around untouched. Then comes the courtroom chaos and the big question of immunity. When Keefe D got booked and arraigned on a first-degree murder charge, most people expected him to keep his head down, stay quiet, let his lawyers handle everything, and hope for the best. But that's not Keefe D's style. From the moment he stepped into that courtroom, he acted less like a man facing life in prison, and more like the star of his own true crime documentary. And the drama that's followed has exposed just how tangled this case really is. The first major battle his defense team pushed was the immunity argument. His lawyers claimed that everything Keefe D said in interviews, in his book, on podcasts, everywhere should be protected under the agreement he made with law enforcement back in 2008 and 2009 during the Biggie investigation. They argued that because he talked about Tupac's murder in those proffer sessions, and because multiple agencies elapsed, Las Vegas police, even federal officers heard it and allowed it, he was effectively granted immunity for anything he admitted to.
Be thinking me, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think what Greg Kading's point was that when, he recorded you did the proffer agreement, all that can't be used against you. But if you choose to do interviews and talk about it again, that can be used against you.
The prosecution wasn't buying it. They argued that even if Keefe D had limited immunity for certain conversations with law enforcement, that protection didn't cover him taking to every media outlet to publicly confess his role in the murder. Even more damning, they highlighted how Keefe D had been cashing in on his admissions, raking in money from book sales, getting paid for documentary appearances, and turning his notoriety into a personal payday. Under Nevada law, you can't profit from your crimes, and the prosecution argued that his monetization of Tupac's murder was a clear sign of consciousness of guilt. The judge seemed to side with them. Multiple motions to dismiss based on immunity were shot down, and the case pressed forward. But that was just one layer of the courtroom drama. Things were about to get even more intense.
Not only ugly on the outside, but they ugly on the inside too.
Dwayne Keefe D. Davis lashing out at prosecutors during another hearing about releasing him on bail.
During one particularly tense bail hearing, Keefe D. couldn't stay quiet. He spoke out of turn, visibly frustrated with how prosecutors were portraying both him and his family.
Speaking out of turn, Davis says he believes those boxes came from retired LAPD detective Greg Kading, who interviewed Davis as part of the investigation into the death of rapper Notorious B.I.G. In a recorded interview, Davis told Kading what happened in Shakur's case, believing he would have immunity.
His anger was especially directed at the evidence prosecutors were using against him, boxes of documents and interview transcripts from the original investigations. The prosecution revealed a 2006 interview with a gang member who directly implicated Davis in Tupac's murder, an interview conducted years before Keefe D. ever went public with his confessions.
Those boxes contain a 2006 interview from a gang member who prosecutors say implicates Davis in Shakur's murder.
He makes that statement 2 years before any confession the defendant ever made.
This was a critical point because it demonstrated that law enforcement had evidence linking Keefe D. to the case independent of anything he publicly admitted. The discussion over bail quickly escalated into a major courtroom showdown.
Tuesday's hearing centered on that new evidence. The main reason was Davis's bail, the judge denying Davis's first attempt over concerns the man putting up the more than $112,000 was really a middleman. She also said she was concerned Davis could profit off the alleged crime.
Technically, under Nevada law, someone can profit from their story until they're convicted. Keefe D's legal team argued that he had the right to continue earning from his story at least until a jury declared him guilty. This created a surreal scenario. A man charged with one of the most infamous murders in hip-hop history could potentially make money recounting the very events he was being prosecuted for. It was a legal catch-22 that underscored just how extraordinary this case had become. But the courtroom tension hit a new level when Keefe D. began naming others he believed should face scrutiny for their roles in unsolved hip-hop murders. Most notably, he pointed the finger at Reggie Wright Jr., the former head of security at Def